Hello, welcome to the 17th episode of the Elixir of Awareness channel. Our whole effort in this channel is by spreading awareness, make the world a better place for living and reach inner peace. We truly appreciate you for supporting us. The title of this episode is Before You Know It. Our main source in this episode is a book titled Before You Know, written by Dr. John Bargh, a professor of psychology at Yale University. You probably saw the series Bernard's Watch. If you remember, whenever things went wrong, Bernard would keep time using his amazing watch, and then he'd patiently fix everything and make time flow again. Imagine if each of us had a Bernard watch, so many cognitive errors wouldn't happen. If we could stop time in difficult moments and think for a moment, analyze, evaluate, and then make a decision, then our brain would no longer need quick and risky reactions. And for this reason, many of the brain shortcuts that currently exist in our subconscious wouldn't be formed. But we live in a world where we need to constantly react in the moment. Therefore, with the least signs, we must quickly decide what our feelings, our behavior, and our reaction will be. In human history, we never could stop what's happening around us and then do the most correct, best, and safest thing. For example, one of the things that exist in the behavioral structure of all of us is the ability to share. But why do we like to tell others what we see and hear? Why keeping a secret is so difficult for us and takes a lot of emotional energy from us? Charles Darwin believed that our emotions evolved to help us communicate important information about disease, safety, and danger to each other. This sharing ability and the fact that we like to talk to each other and pass on information has been a good advantage for our survival throughout human history. Our brain disseminates information and helps communities react better to unexpected happenings. Our species has evolved like this to feel and also express its feel automatically and involuntarily. Because these two behaviors help us survive. Humans can hide their feelings from each other just for a while. But the point is that we needed trust to be able to work together, and we needed the honesty to build that trust. And the interesting and important thing that makes this honest relationship possible between us is that people can't hide their feelings from each other for a long time. Because finally their eyes or their facial muscles, their feelings and mood, and the other details in their body language reveal their story. Both formation of our emotions and the expression of our emotions are formed unconsciously. Because for the information that is transmitted from us to others to be believable, the occurrence of these feelings also should be as automatic or involuntary as possible. Dante is the author of the Divine Comedy, which has 3 books under the titles Purgatory, Hell, and Heaven. In Purgatory, Dante describes hell. According to Dante, hell has different levels, and in the worst place of hell are those who are being punished and suffering for betraying someone's trust, friend, or family. And an interesting feature of this floor, according to Dante, is that that part of hell is extremely cold. The punishment for traitors in this level of hell is extremely cold, painful, and bone-burning. According to Dante, this is the only floor of hell that is cold. But can this description have an unconscious reason? There's a lot of interesting research here. We feel and understand betrayal with a kind of feeling of cold. Have you noticed that when someone betrays someone, at the moment when the betrayal is proven, your friend says to you, "It was like a bucket of ice water was poured on me"? It's interesting to know that this issue has an unconscious reason and is a common feeling among all people. One of the strange things that affects our subconscious is the temperature factor. In fact, how much we experience cold or heat is important in the formation of our unconscious. Neuroscience has discovered that when we're faced with a feeling of social coldness, such as a betrayal of trust, our brain structures are activated exactly as if we're touching a cold object. The opposite of this also happens. So to evaluate this point, the author of the book and his colleagues conducted very interesting research. For the participants in this experiment not to be influenced by their conscious mind, and the researchers could see their unconscious reaction, they used a trick. They asked the participants to go to the 4th floor with a researcher to answer a series of psychological questionnaires. But the whole experiment is supposed to take place in the elevator, not the 4th floor. Without the participants realizing it, they were divided into 2 groups. Here the experiment begins. When a group enters the elevator with the research person, the researcher holds a cup of hot coffee and an office bag in which, for example, the form of psychological questions is kept. But for another group, the researcher uses a cup of cold drink. And then the next thing is happen, which is common between the two groups. Questionnaire sheets are released from the researcher's hands in a demonstration, and the sheets are spread on the floor. At the same time, the closed-circuit camera records all the events, and the team of researchers carefully monitors the experiment through the monitor. And researchers just wanted to check one thing. They wanted to know whether getting a hot or cold cup affected the volunteer's decision to help the researcher and collect the papers from the elevator floor or not. And the interesting thing is, yes. Strangely enough, those participants who felt physical warmth also showed more social and emotional warmth, and almost all of them helped the experimenter collect the sheets. And of course, those who'd experienced physical coldness helped significantly less. Think about this simple but very strange experiment for a moment. What kind of cup we hold with what temperature is related to how willing we're to help others, and it subconsciously affects how we feel and what we decide. Do you see how small things shape our decisions before even we know it? In 2003, a research team at the University of Michigan published a comprehensive study on the effect of weather on the performance of stock markets in the world. This research team analyzed data on weather and stock prices in 26 major stock markets of the world, related to 15 years. They found that the sunlight that traders were exposed to on the way to the stock market or financial institution's office was strongly and significantly related to the increase in prices that day. Also, cloudy weather was associated with poor productivity of stock markets during that day. And don't forget that they studied this process for 15 years in 26 major stock markets of the world. Stock markets would work better if the weather was sunny. The mood of thousands of people around the world, who were responsible for buying and selling billions of dollars of stocks, was changing to the same extent as the mood of those volunteers that we talked about in the elevator test, and therefore the entire market was affected by them. Do you remember that at the beginning of this episode we said that if we understand more the effects of the environment on our unconscious and make it conscious, our free will also increase? Now let's finish this discussion about temperature and the unconscious mind with research to understand this concept a little better. Well, so far we know that weather and temperature affect our moods. But if we're aware of this effect, and if we know and understand that it has an effect, can we reduce its effect? Here is a very interesting experiment. Two groups of students were contacted and asked about their moods and feelings. All the conversations were the same. Only half of the students were asked a question that the other half weren't asked. They asked them, how is the weather where you're now? Is it sunny, cloudy, snowy, or rainy? In the group that answered this question, their moods fluctuated much less under the influence of the weather. That is to say, when you first think about how the weather is, and then in response to the question of how you feel today, you start describing your mood. As a result, the influence of weather on your subconscious mind will be significantly reduced, because you made it your conscious mind. Another strange relic that has been with us since ancient times is the division of the world into two groups, insider and non-insider. A large part of the history of our ancestors has been spent in tribes, and the tribes were constantly fighting with each other. For this reason, our definition of our group and the formation of a group identity under the title of us against them has played an important role in our survival and an important part of history. For this reason, many researches have been conducted that show that we're familiar with this category of us and them from infancy. For example, babies show more desire and attention to their mother tongue than other languages. Even if they don't understand a word of that language, they only recognize the familiar melody and sound of their group and pay more attention to it. This issue starts from infancy and always continues to exist in our minds throughout our lives. Polish-born British social psychologist Henry Taschel and his colleagues conducted research on this division of insider and non-insider in our minds. They showed how small and ridiculous are the reasons that make the categories of our group and their group in our minds. For example, they asked the participants to take out colored balls from inside a box. One group was told to take out the red balls, and the other group was told to take out the blue balls. And then, when the participants were asked to divide a sum of money between themselves, they strangely gave more money to the people who'd the same colored ball and less money to the others. It means that it doesn't need much time or reason to form a category between our group or insiders and the group of others or non-insiders in our minds. If we were born in another place with a different culture, we'd be different people now. And many of the things we fanatically believe in are just the result of our accidental birth in the geography in which we live. From the moment we come into the world, we absorb the culture of our society like a sponge. And the problem is that when children absorb the culture of their society, they absorb it with all its flaws. It means that our unconscious hasn't and doesn't have a good or bad or logical or illogical filter. And whatever things are in the environment are completely absorbed. Here again, the importance of self-awareness is raised. Let's think about the things that we think are completely right or wrong. And think under the influence of what factors were they formed. Think about how true or false they really are. And a more serious question that we can ask ourselves is that when we were children and absorbed the culture of society like a sponge, what was the culture of our society? And think about what things we wrongly attracted. In a very surprising experiment, a large group of Asian student girls who live in America were examined. The details of the experiment are like this before the math test. A group of them was told to paint a picture of a little girl with a doll in her hand. But another group of them was told to paint a picture of a Japanese food table that represented their Asian identity. Just this simple thing of what painting each of them had painted had caused a different part of their identity to be activated. Actually, Asian girls once took the exam as a girl and once as an Asian girl. And in general American culture, Asian girls are supposed to be good at math. And this is a common belief. And ordinary girls aren't supposed to perform well in math compared to Asians. When they auditioned for the role of an Asian girl, their performance was significantly better because of the focus on their Asian identity. And as ordinary girl, their performance was much weaker. Do you see how culture, beliefs, and values settle in our minds and determine our destiny? Not only the evolutionary past of distant years, but even the past a few seconds ago has an unconscious effect on the formation of our moods, behaviors, and decisions. In our daily life, we usually go from one situation or a certain experience to another experience or situation. It means that things happen constantly in the world around us, and that we constantly experience different moods. But the point is that it takes some time for our mind to eliminate the effects of the previous moment and enter the new moment. Our brain doesn't work in such a way that when something new happens, we immediately enter a new experience. Rather, it will take some time for us to change our mode. You've probably heard the remix tracks. If you pay attention, it will take some time until the mood of the previous song disappears and we can communicate with the new music. The effects of recent past moments disappear only with the passage of time and gradually. And this means that a part of our minds always lives in the past. Also, because our conditions are constantly changing, we see and experience the world around us also differently. And the interesting thing is that we often confuse our changes with the changes in the world. For example, when you've a baby, especially the first baby, suddenly the phenomena around you give you their dangerous and scary aspects. That is to say, they see the world as more unsafe than ever because you've a baby to take care of. In fact, parents' needs and responsibilities to protect their children change their view of the whole world. For example, 1,800 citizens over the age of 18 were asked how much do you think the crime rate has changed in the last 8 years. The pattern they found in the answers was like this. If the person in question hadn't had any child during these 8 years, they'd say that the amount of crime has decreased. But if the person had a child during these 8 years, they'd say that the amount of crime has increased. Do you see? By changing our feelings, our behavior, and even the world we observe changes. And sometimes this issue has very deep and interesting effects. For example, some researchers examined the relationship between feeling of disgust and sadness with shopping. A video of a dirty toilet was shown to some people, and their feeling of disgust in them became active. Before the test, they were given a pen to them. And after the test, they asked to set a price for the pen. The researchers wanted to know how valuable these participants considered that pen, those whom the feeling of disgust was activated. What they realized is that disgust is equal to buying at a lower price and selling at a lower price. That is to say, when we feel disgusted, everything around us becomes worthless. They were willing to pay less money for that pen and also sell it at a lower price. But about the feeling of sadness, the story is a little different. Sadness makes us make the worst decisions economically. When the researchers showed participants a sad short film for 4 minutes, they were willing to sell the pen at a lower price, but were willing to buy it at a higher price. And buying at a high price and selling at a low price is the worst possible economic decision. But sadness unconsciously makes us make this worst decision. In general, the feeling of sadness obsessively makes us buy more, and of course a bad purchase, and many businesses commercially abuse this. For example, in 2015, at the general meeting of the shareholders of Walmart Company, several plans were proposed to improve the business. One of the suggestions was to play sad songs in all their chain stores. So Walmart Company paid for the copyright of one of the famous Celine Dion albums and played it continuously in its stores. This led to an increase in the sales of Walmart stores, and customers made more purchases, and of course bad purchases. But it had other effects on Walmart stores' employees, who'd to listen to repetitive sad songs for hours on end. And after a period, their protest caused the style of music's changed again. Now that we've examined the effect of the distant past, childhood, and the very recent past on our unconscious, it's good to talk a little about the hidden influence of the present. As we said in the Brain Maze episode, our brain is stuck in the dark prison of our skull and depends on the signs of the outside world to ensure our survival. Through different senses such as the sense of touch, sense of taste, sense of smell, sense of sight, and sense of hearing, a set of information is collected and a reaction or a decision is formed in us. And our brain uses a series of techniques to establish a connection between the perception unit and reaction unit as quickly as possible to be able to implement a decision faster. One of these techniques that helps us react faster is imitation. We're literally born imitators. That is, imitation plays a very important role in our subconscious mind. Steve Toltz has one sentence in his masterpiece novel, A Fraction of the Whole, and this sentence is that people don't think, but just repeat. They don't analyze, but they ruminate. They don't digest, they just copy. But why are we so imitative, and why is imitation a part of our mental structure? We usually do this imitation, rumination, and repetition at the unconscious level, and we're completely unaware of it. And also at the same time, a lot of information enters our subconscious. To analyze this information and maintain our survival, our brain checks the information it receives with 3 factors: power, assessment, and activity. Power means that every time we see a phenomenon or a person, we think how much weaker or stronger it's than us. Assessment, it means, now that we know how much stronger or weaker it's than us, in the next step we want to know how good or bad it's. It means how dangerous it can be for us, or how useful it can be for us. And activity means this subject whose information has reached our brain, is it active or passive? It seems that we're watching all the world, people, and phenomena from the top of a high peak. For example, trees are strong, good, and passive, but not so with snakes. The snake is strong, not good, and it's active, which means it moves and can harm us. We also judge people and phenomena with the same system. Among these 3 factors, the most important factor is assessment. That is to say, regardless of whether it's strong or weak, active or inactive, the most important issue is our assessment of it. That is it harmful or useful? Does it lead to pain, or can it remove a pain from us? The basic criterion of good or bad in this moral framework is whether it's for our benefit or to our detriment. But to understand this, our brain uses one of the most important factors called similarity. Let's review this short section very quickly. We said that we're imitative creatures, and we constantly evaluate the world, and one of the things that we consider as good for us are things that are similar to us. Even very small things can activate this similarity and feeling of love in us, and it causes us to make many of the most important decisions in our lives under the influence of this similarity factor. Well, for example, where to migrate. 3 psychologists examined the census in different years in American society and noticed a very strange thing. What they found was that the number of people whose name is Ken in the state of Kentucky, the number of people whose name is Louise is in the state of Louisiana, the number of Florences in the state of Florida, and the number of Georges in the residents of the state of Georgia have a significant difference in terms of frequency compared to other names. And please attention, these names were just a few examples that we mentioned. But you might think, well, for example, if Ken lives in Kentucky, it's because his parents were there and that's why they chose his name Ken, because it's more like the name of the state Kentucky. But the matter is much more complicated than these words. The abundance of these names in these states isn't just because they were born in these states. Rather, it was because those people had migrated to these states. That is to say, they preferred and chose these states to live in. Do you see how the similarity of our name with a place, if we've the freedom to choose to migrate, it can subconsciously determine the destination of our migration? And maybe in this way, it may determine the fate of our whole life. We just want to say that similarity is so important for us, and it affects our lives. Mr. Dr. John Bargh also talks about another research done at Yale University. At the beginning of the academic year, they identified some people who were very weak in math and conducted an experiment with them. They were brought into the classroom one by one and given a fake New York Times article about a math genius. The story of a mathematical genius who won an important prize. Then they were asked to write a summary of this story. The participating children were divided into 2 groups without realizing it. A group saw in the article a date of birth that was the date of birth of that mathematical genius, and for example, it was coincidentally the same as the date of their birth. Just pay attention that this was a trick of the researchers. But in another group, this date of birth had nothing to do with the date of birth of the participants. A year later, the researchers checked the final scores of all the participants in this experiment. The researchers were surprised to find that the scores of students whose birthdays were the same as the math genius in the fictional story were significantly better and higher than the other group whose birth date was different from that math genius. This experiment proves that our subconscious mind takes even a small and simple similarity, such as the date of our birth, so seriously, and how this affects our fate. In general, our perception of the surrounding environment leads to our moral decisions, and later we put a layer of consciousness on these decisions. That is to say, we think we decided with logic and common sense, but sometimes we don't even know only a very small factor has affected our decision. For example, research shows that the details of the defendant's face are related to the length of their sentence and the amount of their punishment. By examining a large number of cases, the researchers realized that when the accused have an innocent and childlike face, are usually found less guilty than the rest of the people, and if they're found guilty, they're usually given a lesser punishment. According to the cultural stereotypes that exist in some people's minds and are often unfortunately somehow racist, very small and minor things lead to very big differences. For example, researchers found that black defendants who'd very dark skin compared to black defendants who'd slightly lighter skin, were sentenced to an average of 3 years longer, while all of them had committed crimes with the same level of punishment. Let's clear our minds a little and have a short review. We talked about how we look at things from a high peak to react and make decisions. And we said we measure everything with 3 important factors. One was the assessment factor that creates good and bad in our minds. And we said that what shapes this assessment is an important factor called similarity or cultural stereotypes that shape our identity and evaluation of good and bad. Bertrand Russell has a sentence that says, "Our most prejudiced beliefs are the ones that have the least reasons for their correctness." Many of these assessments that we've of people or phenomena are caused by the culture that we absorbed like a dry sponge. For example, look at sports competitions to see how prejudice against a team or club can cause the most violent behavior. The similarity is so important to us that it has made us one of the most imitator species on this planet. This trait of imitating has also a dark aspect because we don't just imitate good things. We imitate bad behaviors also and feelings. Pay attention to this experiment. It's very interesting. A series of people were divided into two groups. They were told to make sentences with a series of words. A group had meaningful and beautiful words, but another group had rude and ugly words. The main point of the experiment was that they'd hand over their papers to the researcher after finishing the work. But always another person was talking to the researcher artificially. What the researchers wanted to find out was how long the participants could wait for their conversation to end and then hand over the form to the researcher person. The researchers noticed something strange. They realized that the group of people who made sentences with bad and obscene words had become more rude. And they were interrupting their conversation very quickly and in a hurry to hand over papers to the researcher person. But if the participants were from a group that had made a sentence with beautiful and polite words, they'd have watched for 10 minutes or even more until researchers finished their conversation. And then they'd respectfully hand over their paper to the researcher's hand. Do you see how our behaviors are contagious and how words can even affect our behavior? Interestingly, the researchers changed these two groups during the weeks, but the final result was always the same. What's clear is that we copy and imitate each other's good or bad behavior. This isn't good news, but the hopeful thing is that we, as citizens living on this planet, may be able to multiply it in other humans also by doing good behavior. Another interesting thing that the researchers realized is that the goal misleads and blinds us. Because the goal is placed in our subconscious system, it's implemented as a hidden instruction or code and affects our behaviors, attitudes, and judgments. The goal causes our priorities and evaluation of the situation to change completely. Our goals have such an important influence on our behaviors and reactions that they can even override our long-held values and beliefs. To understand this, researchers went to people who decided to become Christian pastors to spend their lives helping other people. In 1970, Princeton University conducted a very strange experiment with the presence of these young priests. The young pastors that hadn't known it was a test were asked to give speeches about beneficence and good deeds on a building. All priests had to go from one building to another to reach the lecture place. The point of this experiment was that they'd been told that they should hurry because it's late and they'd to reach the nearby building very quickly. And on the way, everyone was passing by a needy person in old clothes and in very bad condition. But this needy person was actually an actor and a member of the research team. The main purpose of this research was to see which of the young priests stops on the way and helps that ragged and needy person. The test result was very strange. It turned out that what predicts whether a religious studies student will stop to help and do good or not was just the simple issue of being in a hurry or not in a hurry. That is to say, if it's late after hearing the sentence, "Hurry up," the purpose of the speech would be more important for them. Without paying attention to the person in need and without even closing them, they'd pass by them. Our focus to reach a specific goal can make us blind. Research shows another interesting thing about the relationship between goals and our subconscious. And that is that when we're in a position of power, the hidden effect of the goal increases in us. For us humans, often the goal justifies the means. In the case of many of us, the goal blinds us so much that the path and the possible costs will become unimportant to us. But as we said, when we're in a position of power, this misguidance becomes even more severe. It means that powerful people in society, when they decide to reach a goal, the paths and tools become less important to them. And for this reason, a powerful democratic system and a monitoring system are necessary to keep them away from destructive decisions and keep the society safe. We constantly adjourn a series of things in life. For example, an important phone call or a business meeting, an office task that we always adjourn, or even reading a book that we might postpone for days and months. What's important about these sometimes unpleasant but necessary goals and tasks is to know that these unfulfilled goals and tasks can unconsciously occupy a part of our brain. It means, for example, when we don't make a phone call, maybe we keep it away from our conscious part and try not to think about it. But unconsciously, a significant bandwidth of our unconscious mind is involved in this work. If the number of these backlogs increases, we become in a condition called a restless mind. The restlessness of the mind is directly related to the number of promises we made to ourselves, but we still haven't fulfilled them. The duty of our unconscious and forward-thinking mind isn't only to create happiness for us. Rather, its main task is that we do our planned work. And when we postpone an important task, our subconscious constantly reminds us to do those tasks by creating a sense of worry, restlessness, and anxiety. But what can we learn from this? One thing that can be very effective is to decide to do overdue but necessary tasks. If we want to do creative work, and our impact on our work and life will increase, we must empty the occupied capacity of the unconscious mind as much as possible. There's a two-way street between our unconscious and conscious. To reach the peak of creativity and innovation, we need to be able to travel this road quickly. Now, if we postpone the necessary works, it will cause traffic to form on this road. And with the increase in the number of backlogs works, this traffic will become heavier and heavier. And it's even possible that this road will be blocked, and the communication between our conscious and unconscious will have a problem. As a result, we won't be able to find effective and creative solutions to problems. Another issue is trust. There's a relationship between our unconscious and conscious, the key element of which is trust. That is to say, when you make a promise to yourself with your conscious mind that you'll do something necessary, then trust is created between your conscious and unconscious. And this trust guarantees to keep our promises. As a result, we'll have more control over our lives. When we don't fulfill the promises that our subconscious mind thinks are necessary for our communication and survival, our subconscious mind won't leave us. And it constantly reminds us in different ways so that we finally do them. This wrong and defective cycle is interrupted when we create trust between these two parts of our brain. Then we'll see that we'll feel less anxious or mind restless. And also, in an interesting way, peace also will increase in our life. Another important issue that can help us a lot is intuition. If you're looking for a solution, in the first step, collect as much information as you can, think and check. This sends a message to the subconscious part of your brain that this is a very important issue. When the research and investigation and information collection were done, and we investigated the matter sufficiently with the help of our conscious mind. In the next step, the right decision is to stop the assessment. It means we should stop thinking about it consciously any longer. And we let our subconscious mind, which has received relatively good information from our conscious mind, start processing it in its own way. This process can take a few hours to a few days, but in the end, this method can lead to the fact that when we don't expect it, an idea suddenly finds its way from our unconscious side to our conscious side. But unconscious ideas are usually vague and complicated ideas. Therefore, when an idea from our unconscious mind reaches our conscious mind, we should once again consciously assess that idea, and then choose the best combination of different solutions. And in this way, the probability of solving problems increases, and probably we'll get a more correct answer. It has probably happened to you also that something inspires you when you do not expect it, or an idea comes to your mind, or you find the answer to an important question at a special moment. This is exactly what we're talking about. So first, we collect information with our conscious mind, we think about it, and we analyze it. Then we leave the subject for a few hours or days, and we let our subconscious mind analyze this information in its own way. In the next step, if we had an intuition or an answer that comes from our unconscious mind, again, we assess it with our conscious mind. And with this amazing scientific formula, the probability of getting the right answer increases a lot. An important question arises when we talk about the unconscious part of our mind, which is also the most powerful part of our mind. And that question is about free will. The question is, how much free will do we've? Often, the things that science has discovered and we understand today emphasize that our reactions, feelings, decisions, and behaviors are influenced by small and large factors that affect our subconscious mind. And we're unaware of them and have no control over them. It's very important to understand 3 points here. The first point is that your conscious thoughts matter. This means that according to psychologists' definition of the term conscious thoughts, we've free will, but not in the way we think. And as we thought, this free will isn't complete and powerful. The second point is that if you admit that you don't have completely free will or completely conscious control, you actually increase your free will and control strangely. Walter Johnson, a legendary baseball player, has a quote. He says, "You can't hit what you can't see." If we pretend that these hidden influences don't exist and that our free will is perfect, and if we insist that we've complete control over everything, then we'll lose the opportunity and our free will be less than its. Insisting that what happens in the surrounding environment or what others do has no role in our decisions in life makes us defenseless and weak against these influences. We're like the sailors of our minds, but we've both good sailors and bad sailors. A good, wise, and professional sailor takes into account the flow of the waters and the direction of the winds, and in fact all those factors over which he's no control. And he coordinates his ship with the facilities under his control, such as the rudder and sails, with those uncontrollable factors. In fact, a good sailor makes the best use of the things he's no control over to reach his destination safely. But a bad sailor only focuses on the ship's steering wheel and doesn't consider the other factors, and therefore gets lost in the ocean. Accepting the power of the unconscious is like accepting the power of the ocean against the power of the sailor. The sailor isn't completely passive, but his power increases when he accepts that he doesn't have the power to control all factors. We can use our unconscious forces to serve our efforts and goals. We can use the unconscious power of our mind to solve a problem, increase creativity, and calm our minds. But what's the third point that is extremely important? The third point is that the most effective self-control won't occur voluntarily and through efforts to suppress emotions and undesirable behaviors. In simpler words, we often don't achieve self-control with self-control. People who've a better ability to control themselves and their free will aren't the ones who use their willpower more than other people. Yes, this may be a bit strange for you, but these people have a different trick. These people adjust their lifestyle in such a way that they do good things automatically and by their daily habits. Interestingly, they're less consciously forced to do good and useful things. They adjust their daily habits in such a way that those good deeds that lead to good results are normally and naturally in the heart of their lifestyle. There's a famous, beautiful quote that says, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, isn't an act, but a habit. The important point of this sentence is that we should turn good deeds into daily habits so that they're placed in our subconscious mind. And as a result, without the need to spend a lot of energy and will, those habits will shape our life. Many of us mistakenly believe that to suppress and control our sudden desires, we must have a lot of will and inner strength. And so our life becomes a constant struggle with ourselves. That is to say, our subconscious mind wants something from us, and we decide with our small conscious mind to suppress that thing to do another unnecessary but pleasant works. But new research shows that the story is completely the opposite. People who've good self-control are less exposed to temptations. For this reason, compared to people who've less self-control, they strangely need less effort and energy. That is to say, over time they formed their subconscious minds in such a way that they automatically tend to do good and useful things. In fact, their unconscious mind is in harmony with their conscious mind. You may ask, how is this possible? This will be achieved by our commitment to doing good works over time. That is, the main key is to create good habits for the subconscious mind. To reach self-control doesn't need much self-control. Just for a while, we restrain ourselves and try to make good habits with our conscious mind, and from then on, our unconscious mind demands those good habits from us. And it's in this situation that harmony and connection will form between our unconscious and conscious. A series of other researches show that in the long run, dealing with desires and temptations isn't useful at all. Another thing that successful people do in the field of self-control is that they adjust their living environment in such a way that all the signs and conditions for doing good work are available. If we want to summarize this episode in one word, that word is humility. If we really intend to improve ourselves and our lives, and if we really want to lead society in the right direction, and if we want to make the world a better place, the first thing we need is humility. Humility against the fact that we can't completely control our behaviors, feelings, and reactions. And also humility about something amazing and mysterious called the unconscious, something that controls most of our emotions and behaviors before we know it. When we realistically and humbly can understand the smallness, weakness, and lack of our free will, we'll be able to expand our limited will and make it more and much more. One of the most important steps we must take to become a better human being is to realistically and humbly face the great power within us that we don't have any control on it. And that is a great and amazing hidden power called the unconscious mind. Now, the final question of this episode is, do you ever pay attention to the power of your subconscious mind? Please share your comments with us. Thank you for staying with us till the end.